The USS Atlanta, commissioned shortly after the United States entrance into World War II, these ships were one of a kind. The USS Atlanta, lead ship of her class, was commissioned on December 24, 1941, just 17 days after the brutal attack on Pearl Harbor. Although they were additionally intended to be scout cruisers like the earlier interwar Omaha class, they proved to be excellent anti-air cruisers due to their enormous capability and their 16 dual-purpose 5-inch 38 caliber guns. Faced with the new looming threat of Japanese air attack, the Atlanta class quickly became suited to their new role as fleet anti-aircraft cruisers. As for their technical specs, while armed with such a heavy battery of guns, the Atlantas were notorious for having weak armor. This was shown in the naval battle of Guadalcanal, as 2 out of the 8 Atlanta-class ships were sunk by surface fire from enemy ships. They were armed and armored as a sort of super destroyer, yet still retained the size and agility of a cruiser. Another thing worth mentioning is that the 5-inch 38 caliber gun that had been so successful in destroyers and battleship secondaries was actually worse off on the Atlantas because there were too many. Funnily enough, the ship had too many guns and would suffer early in the war due to lack of gun directors. As for their service lives, the Atlanta class lived fairly uneventful careers, with the exception of 2 out of the 8 ships. The first, the USS Atlanta, was present at the Battle of Midway and the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, but she really shone at the naval battle of Guadalcanal. On the night of November 12, 1942, the Atlanta was moving to intercept an incoming Japanese task force that was approaching Henderson Airfield. As she was searching for the task force, she was illuminated by a spotlight from the Japanese destroyer Akatsuki. The Akatsuki would soon regret that, however, as the Atlanta turned all 14 of her 5-inch guns and unleashed upon the Akatsuki. As she sank the Akatsuki, however, 2 more destroyer escorts appeared and fired torpedoes at the Atlanta. A single torpedo found its way into Atlanta's engine room and disabled nearly all power to the ship. To make matters worse, a friendly cruiser, the USS San Francisco, fired 19 8-inch shells into the Atlanta, believing she was an enemy. The next day, the Atlanta was scuttled due to being unable to salvage. The other Atlanta class to make a notable appearance was the USS Juneau, which was also sunk at Guadalcanal. Although there was no large naval battle as with the USS Atlanta, she was hit by a torpedo from a submarine which caused magazine detonation and caused the ship to sink in less than half a minute. All 5 of the Sullivan brothers were on board and subsequently died, leading to the Navy policy that all of a family's children may not be placed in the same boat to avoid the loss of an entire family such as the Sullivans. Now, for the gameplay. Alright, so this game was in the ranked battles, um, I think it's season 6 now or something like that, but, I'm playing Atlanta, and disregard the pink, I was playing a game in a Benson, and there was a very, unwatchful Sims who ran directly into my torpedoes, but, uh, yeah, this is I think one of the best examples I have of how to best use the Atlanta. And just look at the amount of guns it has, like, it's a little insane. And it has a reload time of, I think, 2.5 seconds, something crazy like that, 2.5 or 3. But, um, just some general tips for the ship. Do not charge into battle. Yes, you have torpedoes, but they're only 4.5 kilometer range. And yes, you have a lot of guns, but those guns are useless if you're going up against a heavily armored ship at close range, even if you use AP. If you get within 5 kilometers of another cruiser, you can use AP only if they're broadside on. But do not just try to charge in. You're a support ship, and as you'll see in a little bit, which I can go ahead and speed up the uh, replay, you just gotta sit back and fire. You have basically no armor at all. A tin can would be more armored than you. You are one of the slowest destroyers of tier 7. Let me speed this up a lot. And there was a guy now that's AFK on the other side, so we all started hammering away on him. But as you'll see, just watch the rate of fire in this thing. Like, look at that. And we just sat there and shot at him, and that's what you do. And I do have IFHE loaded, so you notice that there are significantly more high explosive penetrations than there would normally be. which I do recommend getting IFHE for the ship, and it increases your damage so much. I used to average about 25, 30 damage, okay, like per game because it wasn't you just would bounce all your shells. But with IFHE, I've been averaging about 60 to 70 damage, and that's even with hunting more than just destroyers. That's like battleship and stuff. It reduces your high explosive chance, but I mean, if you just if you get demolition expert, it pretty much balances out. As you can see, I'm trying to fire over these mountains, and even though it tells you that the mountains may be in the way, a few shells may escape through, like those two that just went through there. But I remembered that there were two battleships around here somewhere, so I popped my radar, and would you look at that? 3 kilometers away, there's a Scharnhorst, and so I consider for a second torping him, and I realize that is a terrible idea. So I just immediately start booking it, and he knows that I'm here too. He starts aiming at me, so I'm getting out of there because I know that if I get close enough, my secondary or his secondaries will shred me. You like secondary, especially from a German battleship, will shred the Atlanta at like anywhere that they can reach you. So of course, I start kiting away, and I use my friendly Scharnhorst here as cover. And that's basically what you do. You get close, but not too close, because I mean you have to get close. It's only has like a 11 kilometer range without demolition expert, but and I just start firing away. And at this part, I've already racked up 75 hits, and I'm still going, and I've already lit a fire, and I notice there's torpedoes. So of course I have to start angling away, which kind of puts a stop on the action for a bit. But you'll notice how the turning circle of this, it's not the greatest, and you're only going a top speed of 32 knots, which for a cruiser is pretty slow. So, and then I notice there's a Gneiss now, so I, of course, start firing away again. But at this point I've racked up 106 hits, 17,000 damage, and a fire, which that's not too shabby considering there's no destroyers this game. So your main target, my main target wasn't here. You have the hydro and the radar to go after destroyers, but it wasn't there. But again, with the firing arcs on these guns, you can fire over mountains, you can fire over hills. That Gneiss now was sitting behind those rocks and I fired at it. But just look at this thing, man. Gneiss now gets light on fire. I hide behind the Scharnhorst again. And the Scharnhorst actually has to turn up there ahead to avoid that island. But that's what causes him to slow down, and I can get more and more hits on him. There's Pensacola there, but he's not focusing me, and I'm still behind the Scharnhorst, so not even a problem. The Scharnhorst starts focusing me, which is definitely a problem. His 11-inch shells can and most likely will get you, but I try to stay as angled as possible. Don't ever go directly bound because you have basically zero reload, so you're not gonna get very far with that. But as you can see, just the constant hammering of it is doing some pretty decent damage. I've 50, 60, nope, he's gone. That right there was, oh my gosh, 256 hits. Now I start firing at the other Scharnhorst, and it just continues. You just kite the enemy around and keep firing at them no matter what. And the trick is to not get close enough to where you have no time to maneuver. That was a bad move on my part. I should have stayed more angled, but my friendly Scharnhorst came in clutch and killed him. So now all we have left is 2 cruisers, which against 4 battleships and 2 other cruisers isn't that much of a problem. So as you can see, this ship definitely has good situational strength if you just play it smart. If you stay somewhat angled and stay with your fleet, you can do insane amount of damage. I've deleted cruisers before simply by loading AP within 5 kilometers and just I've gotten 12 citadels in one broadside before. It's amazing. So I think about going for this Miyoko, but My friendly Scharnhorst gets him. As you can see, I zoom in there and disregard it. As for the Pensacola, he starts slowing down, so he's the only one left, so of course turn in to get him. But I think that's it. 289 shots, 6 fires. I killed one. Uh, Airplanes. If you load defensive AA, carriers can't touch you. It's it's amazing. Like if since defensive AA uses your main guns too, you are almost invincible from air attacks. I normally run Hydra though because you see less and less carriers in matchmaking, especially in ranked battles. So it works. And if you just play it smart, just you'll get insane amounts of free XP and credits and everything. I mean, it's a glass cannon. Or it's a glass machine gun, really. It's like having 3 gearings strapped to each other. With an extra gearing on either side. Oh my gosh. If you look, and then I think it'll show damage. Alright, so I just checked, and apparently on replays you cannot get the damage in XP, but I remember it was something around, I think, 2,000 XP and I think 61,000 damage. But since I can't do that, I'll go over the stats real quick. Survivability, your armor, virtually non-existent. In your Citadel, it's it's kind of weird. It's kind of a blessing and a curse that you have almost no armor because any big shells will just shoot through you. There's nothing there for them to get stopped by, and it's very unlikely unless you just show full broadside that you will ever get citadeled. Um, as for the guns, I mean, as mentioned, these glorious 16 uh 5-inch guns, which the Flint, which you will encounter, is just in Atlanta without these two side mounts, but with 9.2 kilometer torpedoes and its own personal smoke generator, which that means it's part of the subclass of Atlanta, which was called the Juno class, I think, if mentioned, because they built a second Juno after the first one sank. But torpedoes, as mentioned, 4.5 kilometers, 65 knots, so they're pretty speedy. And detectability range is 1.3. So if you get close enough to use them, but don't try to use them as an offensive weapon because you want to. Like, don't use them unless it's absolutely necessary. 20 millimeter guns, you have 8 single mounted ones, and then you have these 1.1 inch guns, which they were introduced in the late 1930s, but they were never really effective. And on the later model Atlantas, they were replaced by more 40 millimeters. But I mean, they still do a decent amount of damage at 33 damage per second. And then you've got of course your main guns, which those add quite a bit. Maneuverability, 32.5 knot top speed, turning circle radius 610 meters, which is pretty big for a cruiser. It takes 8.4 seconds to shift the rudder. Concealment, you can actually get this down to I think 8 kilometers, but I never really found a reason for it because you can't stealth fire in this thing. It's almost impossible. Detectability by range is actually pretty decent, but I mean, not much to this ship other than AA, uh, 0 armor, and a machine gun main armament. There are no secondaries, just considering everything would normally, like all the main guns would normally be considered a secondary on other ships. But yeah, just look at it. So I guess this has been my Atlanta commentary. So yeah, if you have any other ships, just leave a comment. Thanks.